Just one more day, please.
Under the fluorescent lights of UCLA Medical Center, a woman's voice trembled with desperation. In her worn hands she clutched a $14 receipt, and beside her stood two children whose terrified eyes fixed on the receptionist's desk. Across the lobby, a successful CEO named Ethan Cole felt his phone slip from his fingers and shatter against the floor. The woman begging for mercy was someone he had abandoned 8 years ago, and in the face of the 14-year-old boy, he saw a mirror of his own past. In that single moment, his $2 million penthouse and billion-dollar empire crumbled into dust. Welcome to Story Theater. Take your seat, silence your phones and get ready to enjoy the story. The lobby of UCLA Medical Center smelled like disinfectant and old coffee. Ethan Cole sat in a plastic chair near the wide windows, his briefcase resting against his ankle. He was 39 years old, dressed in a charcoal suit that cost more than most people made in a month. His tie was loosened just enough to suggest he was busy, important, always in motion. The morning light came through the glass and pale sheets, washing over the waiting patients and the tired staff behind the desk. He checked his phone. 10:42. His appointment was at 11. Routine physical. Nothing urgent. Just the kind of thing successful men did to prove they still cared about their bodies, even when their schedules left no room for sleep. He scrolled through emails without reading them. His mind was elsewhere, caught in the rhythm of his week. Board meetings, investor calls, a product launch in 2 days. His life was a machine, and he was the engine. Around him, the lobby hummed with quiet desperation. An elderly man coughed into his fist. A young mother rocked a crying baby. Somewhere behind the reception counter, a printer whirred and spat out papers. Ethan barely noticed. He had learned long ago how to exist in public spaces without truly being present. It was a skill that came with success. Then a voice cut through the noise. Please, just one more day. The voice was soft, but it carried a weight that made Ethan's fingers pause over his phone screen. He did not look up. Not yet. But something in the tone, the desperation wrapped in forced calm, made his chest tighten. Ma'am, I understand, but the account has been overdue for 3 months now. The receptionist's voice was tired, not unkind, but firm. Ethan could hear the shuffle of papers, the click of a keyboard. He glanced toward the counter without meaning to. His eyes found the woman first. She stood near the edge of the desk, her body angled as if she wanted to make herself smaller, less visible. She wore a coat that had once been brown but was now faded to something closer to gray. The hem was frayed. One of the buttons was missing. Her hair was pulled back in a loose ponytail, strands escaping around her face. She was thin, too thin, and her shoulders curved inward. Like she was trying to shield herself from the world. Ethan's heart stopped. Grace Miller. He knew her face the way he knew his own reflection. 8 years. 8 years since he had walked away from her, from the cramped apartment they shared, from the life they were trying to build together. He had told himself it was for the best. He had a startup to run, investors breathing down his neck, no time for anything else. She had wanted more. He had wanted success. The choice had felt obvious at the time. Now she stood 10 feet away, begging a receptionist for mercy. Ethan's hands went cold. He lowered his phone slowly, his eyes fixed on her. She had not seen him yet. She was too focused on the woman behind the desk, too caught up in her own panic. Grace's hands were clasped together, her knuckles white. Her voice wavered as she spoke again. I have the money coming. I promise. I just need a few more days. My daughter, she needs her medication. She can't go without it. Beside her stood 2 children. The boy was tall for his age, maybe 14, with dark hair that fell into his eyes. He wore a jacket 2 sizes too big, the sleeves rolled up to his wrists. His face was hard, older than it should be, like he had learned too early not to trust anyone. He stood close to the woman, protective, his jaw tight. The girl was younger, 11 or 12, small and fragile looking. Her coat was thin, and she held a stuffed rabbit against her chest. Her eyes were wide, darting between her mother and the receptionist. Like she was trying to understand what was happening but did not want to. Ethan's gaze locked on the boy. It was like looking into a mirror from 25 years ago. The same sharp cheekbones, the same line of the jaw, the same wary eyes that expected nothing good from the world. Ethan felt his stomach drop. His fingers tightened around his phone until the edges bit into his palm. No. The word echoed in his mind, but it had no power. The truth was there, undeniable, staring back at him from the boy's face. Ma'am, I'm sorry, the receptionist said. Her voice was softer now, almost apologetic. But without payment, We can't refill the prescription. You'll need to speak with billing. They open at 1. Grace's shoulders sagged. Her head tipped forward, and for a moment Ethan thought she might cry. But she did not. She took a breath, straightened, and nodded. Okay, she said quietly. Thank you. She turned, and her eyes swept across the lobby. Ethan froze. For a second, he thought she would see him. But her gaze passed over him without recognition. She was too tired, too buried in her own struggle to notice. A man in a suit sitting near the window. The boy took her arm gently, guiding her toward the door. The girl followed, clutching her rabbit. Grace's voice was barely audible as she spoke to her children. It's okay. We'll figure it out. We always do. Ethan's phone slipped from his hand. It hit the floor with a sharp crack, the screen shattering into a web of lines. The sound echoed through the lobby, louder than it should have been. Several people looked over. Ethan did not move. He stared at the broken phone, then at the door where Grace and the children were disappearing into the bright morning light. His heart was pounding now, a dull roar in his ears. The lobby noise faded into static. He could not hear the printer anymore, or the baby crying, or the elderly man coughing. All he could hear was Grace's voice, soft and desperate. Just one more day. His hands trembled. He pressed them flat against his knees, but it did not help. His chest felt tight, like something was squeezing the air out of his lungs. He tried to stand, but his legs would not move. He was frozen, locked in place by the weight of what he had just seen. The boy's face, Grace's worn coat, the little girl's thin jacket. Ethan had spent 8 years building an empire. He had a corner office in Silicon Valley, a penthouse in San Francisco, a net worth that most people could not comprehend. He had everything he had ever wanted, and Grace had nothing. A nurse called his name from across the lobby. Ethan Cole. He did not answer. He was still staring at the door, at the empty space where they had been. His mind was racing, fragments of memory crashing together. Grace's laugh. The way she used to look at him like he was the only person in the world. The morning he left, when she had asked him to stay and he had said no. Mr. Cole. The nurse was closer now, her voice tinged with concern. Ethan blinked, his eyes burning. He bent down and picked up his phone. The screen was ruined, but it still worked. He stood slowly, his legs unsteady beneath him. I'm here, he said. His voice sounded strange, distant, like it belonged to someone else. The nurse smiled and gestured for him to follow. Ethan walked forward, his feet moving on autopilot. But his mind was not in the medical center anymore. It was in a basement apartment in Compton, in a place he had never been, but could suddenly see with perfect clarity. Grace's voice echoed in his head. Just one more day. Ethan's hands were still shaking as he followed the nurse down the hallway. Behind him, the lobby continued its endless hum, indifferent and unchanging. But something inside Ethan had cracked open, and he knew with absolute certainty that nothing would ever be the same again. The Novalink Technologies headquarters rose from the heart of Silicon Valley like a monument to ambition. Glass and steel climbed 23 stories into the California sky, reflecting clouds and sunlight in equal measure. The lobby was all white marble and chrome, with a fountain that ran in an endless loop. Security guards in crisp uniforms stood by the entrance. Visitors signed tablets instead of paper. Everything gleamed. Ethan's office occupied the entire top floor. He sat behind a desk made of reclaimed walnut, imported from Oregon at a cost that could have fed a family for a year. Floor-to-ceiling windows stretched along 3 walls, offering a view of the valley that stretched to the mountains. On clear days, you could see San Francisco in the distance. Today the sky was pale blue, cloudless, perfect. 3 journalists sat across from him, recording devices on the desk between them. A photographer stood near the window, adjusting his lens. The interview had been scheduled for weeks. A profile piece for a major tech publication. Ethan Cole, the visionary CEO who had taken a failing software company and turned it into a billion-dollar enterprise in under 6 years. The boy from nowhere who had made it to the top. Mr. Cole, the lead journalist said, glancing at her notes. She was young, maybe 28, with sharp eyes and a confident smile. Novalink's stock price has increased 47% this quarter. What do you attribute that growth to? Ethan looked at her. His face was calm, composed. He had done 100 interviews like this. He knew how to sit, how to smile, how to deliver the right answers without saying anything real. Innovation, he said smoothly. We've always focused on what the market needs before it knows it needs it. Our team is exceptional. We invest in people, in ideas, in the future. The journalist nodded, typing something on her tablet. The photographer moved closer, his camera clicking softly. Ethan did not flinch. He was used to this. The scrutiny, the attention, the performance. Your competitors have struggled this year, another journalist said, a man in his 40s with gray at his temples. Some analysts say you've been ruthless. How do you respond to that? Ethan's smile did not waver. Business is competitive. We play to win. But we do it ethically, within the rules. Our success speaks for itself. The words came easily, practiced and hollow. But behind them, something else was happening. Ethan's mind was not in the room. It was in the lobby of UCLA Medical Center. It was watching Grace's thin shoulders curve inward as she pleaded with the receptionist. It was seeing the boy's hard face, the little girl clutching her rabbit. Just one more day. Grace's voice echoed in his skull, quiet but relentless. Ethan blinked, forcing himself back to the present. The journalist was asking another question. He answered it. He did not know what he said. His mouth moved on autopilot, delivering the lines he had rehearsed 1,000 times. On the wall behind the journalists, a screen displayed live data. Stock prices, quarterly revenue, user engagement metrics. Numbers climbed in real time, green lines ascending like mountains. Ethan's eyes drifted to the screen. 700 million in revenue this quarter. 2,000 employees. Offices in 12 countries. But all he could see was Lucas's face. The boy who looked like him. The boy he had never met. The interview continued. The journalists laughed at something Ethan said. The photographer asked him to stand by the window for a portrait. Ethan complied, his hands in his pockets, his expression confident and relaxed. Inside, his chest felt tight. His throat was dry. He wanted the room to empty, to be alone, to think. Finally, after 40 minutes that felt like hours, the journalists packed their equipment. They thanked him, shook his hand, promised the article would be published next month. Ethan walked them to the elevator, his smile fixed in place. The doors closed. The hum of the descending car faded. He stood in the hallway for a moment, staring at his reflection in the polished steel doors. The man staring back looked successful, put together, in control. Ethan turned away. His office was quiet when he returned. Too quiet. The city sprawled below, alive and bustling, but up here the silence was absolute. Soundproof glass kept the world at bay. Ethan walked to the window and pressed his palm against the cool surface. Down below, cars moved like insects. People walked in rivers along the sidewalks. From this height, they were anonymous, insignificant. He thought about Grace walking out of the hospital with her children. Where did they go after that? Back to Compton, probably. To a home he could not imagine. A life he had abandoned. Ethan's jaw tightened. He turned from the window and looked at his office. The walnut desk. The leather chairs. The abstract painting on the wall that cost $60,000 and meant nothing. Everything here was expensive, curated, perfect. But it felt like a stage set. A place designed to impress, not to live in. He walked to his desk and sat down heavily. His computer screen was dark. He touched the mouse, and it came to life, displaying his calendar. Meetings lined up back to back for the next 3 days. Conference calls. Strategy sessions. A dinner with investors. His life was a series of obligations, each one more important than the last. If this is success, Ethan muttered to the empty room, then where did I go wrong? His voice sounded small, swallowed by the space around him. No one answered. The office remained silent, indifferent. He leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. Behind his eyelids, he saw Grace's face again. Younger this time. The way she looked 8 years ago, when they were still together. Her smile. The way she used to touch his arm when she laughed. The mornings they woke up tangled together in a bed too small for 2 people. He had traded all of that for this. For glass walls and walnut desks and a view of mountains he never looked at. The day dragged on. Ethan attended meetings. He reviewed reports. He signed documents. But his mind was elsewhere, caught in a loop he could not escape. Every time he tried to focus, he saw Lucas's face. Every time he spoke, he heard Grace's voice. The weight of it pressed on him like a stone. By the time the sun began to set, the office had emptied. His assistant knocked on his door at 6, asking if he needed anything. Ethan shook his head. She left, and he was alone again. He stayed until the sky turned from blue to orange to black. The city lights blinked on below, a constellation of human life. Ethan stood at the window and watched them, his reflection ghostly in the glass. Finally, when there was no reason left to stay, he picked up his briefcase and left. The drive to his penthouse took 20 minutes. The building was downtown, 30 floors of luxury condos. Ethan's unit was on the top floor, naturally. $2 million for a view and a kitchen he never used. He parked in the garage and took the private elevator up, the only sound the hum of machinery. The penthouse was dark when he entered. He did not turn on the lights. He walked through the living room, past the leather sofa and the glass coffee table and the minimalist art on the walls. Everything was clean, untouched. A cleaning service came twice a week to maintain the illusion that someone actually lived here. In the kitchen, Ethan opened the refrigerator. A meal had been delivered earlier, pre-prepared by a service he paid $200 a month for. Pan-seared salmon, roasted vegetables, quinoa. He pulled the container out and set it on the counter. He did not bother heating it up. He ate standing, forking food into his mouth mechanically. The salmon was perfectly cooked, tender and flaky. The vegetables were seasoned with herbs he could not name. But none of it mattered. The food tasted like sand. Dry and gritty and tasteless. Ethan chewed, swallowed, chewed again. He was not hungry. He was not anything. He thought about Grace making dinner for her children in a basement apartment. What did they eat? Pasta, probably. Something cheap and filling. Did they sit together at a table? Did the kids talk about their day? Did Grace smile at them, even when she was exhausted? Ethan set the container down. He could not finish it. He walked to the living room and stood by the window. The city stretched out before him, a sea of lights. Somewhere out there, Grace was putting her children to bed. Lucas was probably still awake, reading or doing homework. Emma was curled up under a blanket, clutching her rabbit. And Ethan was here, alone in a penthouse that cost more than most people made in a lifetime, surrounded by everything he had worked for. And it meant nothing. He pressed his forehead against the glass. It was cold, unyielding. His breath fogged the surface. Outside, the world moved on without him. Inside, the silence was absolute. Ethan closed his eyes. For the first time in 8 years, he let himself feel it. The regret, the guilt, the crushing weight of everything he had given up and everything he had lost. It rose in his chest like a tide, threatening to drown him. And in the darkness behind his eyelids, Grace's voice whispered again. Just one more day. Dawn broke over Los Angeles in shades of gray and pink. The city was quiet at this hour, the freeways not yet clogged with traffic. Ethan drove through empty streets, his hands gripping the steering wheel too tight. He had not slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Grace's face, heard her voice pleading with the receptionist. The night had stretched endlessly, each hour marked by the glow of his phone screen as he stared at it without purpose. At 5 in the morning, he had given up on sleep. He had showered, dressed in jeans and a plain shirt instead of his usual suit, and left the penthouse before the sun rose. He did not know where he was going at first. He just drove, letting the car carry him through the waking city. But his hands knew. They turned the wheel, navigated the streets, brought him downtown to a part of Los Angeles he never visited, where the buildings were older, the paint peeling, the windows barred, where people lived who did not have penthouses or personal assistants or stock options. Daniels and Associates occupied the second floor of a brick building wedged between a pawn shop and a laundromat. The sign on the door was faded, the gold lettering chipped. Ethan parked across the street and sat in his car for a long moment, staring at the building. The sky was lighter now, the first rays of sun touching the rooftops. A homeless man pushed a shopping cart down the sidewalk, the wheels squeaking. A truck rumbled past, its engine loud in the morning quiet. Ethan took a breath and got out. The stairwell smelled like old carpet and cigarette smoke. The steps creaked under his weight. At the top, a door stood slightly ajar, a frosted glass panel etched with the words Daniels and Associates Private Investigation. Ethan pushed it open. The office was small and cluttered. Filing cabinets lined one wall, their drawers dented and scratched. A desk sat near the window, covered in folders and coffee cups. The blinds were half closed, slicing the morning light into narrow strips. A coffee maker gurgled in the corner, filling the room with a burnt smell. Behind the desk sat a man in his mid-40s. He had dark hair going gray at the temples, a face that had seen too much sun, and eyes that studied Ethan with quiet assessment. He wore a wrinkled button-down shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows. A wedding ring glinted on his left hand. "You're early," the man said. His voice was rough, like he had been awake all night too. "Office doesn't officially open until 7. "I know," Ethan said. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "I couldn't wait." The man leaned back in his chair, the springs squeaking. He gestured to the seat across from him. "Sit." Ethan sat. The chair was old, the cushion thin and worn. He folded his hands in his lap, then unfolded them, unsure what to do with them. The man watched him, saying nothing. The silence stretched. "You're Mark Daniels?" Ethan asked finally. "That's right." Mark reached for a mug on his desk and took a sip. His eyes never left Ethan's face. "And you are?" "Ethan Cole." Mark's expression did not change. If he recognized the name, he did not show it. He set the mug down and pulled a yellow legal pad from under a stack of folders. He uncapped a pen. "What do you need, Mr. Cole?" Ethan hesitated. Now that he was here, the words felt impossible. "How did you ask someone to investigate the woman you abandoned? How did you explain that you saw her in a hospital lobby and realized everything you thought you knew about your life was a lie?" "I need information," Ethan said slowly. "About someone." "A woman." "And her children." Mark wrote something on the pad. "Name?" "Grace Miller." Mark's pen moved across the paper. "Age?" 37. "Maybe 38 now." "I'm not sure." "Last known address?" Ethan shook his head. "I don't know." "That's what I need you to find out." Mark looked up. His eyes were sharp, calculating. "When did you last see her?" 8 years ago. "Until 2 days ago." The pen paused. Mark leaned forward slightly. "You saw her 2 days ago?" "At UCLA Medical Center." "She was at the reception desk." "With 2 kids." "A boy and a girl." Ethan's voice wavered. He cleared his throat, tried to steady it. "I need to know where they are. Where they're living. How they're living." Mark set the pen down. He studied Ethan for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Outside, a car honked. The coffee maker sputtered and went silent. "Why?" Mark asked. The question was simple, but it hit Ethan like a fist. He opened his mouth, then closed it. "Why?" Because he had seen Lucas's face and recognized himself. Because Grace's voice haunted him. Because he could not stop thinking about the missing button on her coat, the thinness of her shoulders, the way the little girl clutched her rabbit like it was the only thing keeping her safe. "Because I need to know," Ethan said quietly. Mark picked up his pen again. "You said 2 kids. Boy and girl. Do you know their names?" "No." "Ages?" "The boy looked about 14. The girl, maybe 11 or 12. Mark wrote this down. His face was neutral, but something in his posture suggested he understood more than Ethan was saying. He had probably done this kind of work before. Tracking down old lovers, abandoned families, secrets people tried to bury. "Do you have a photo of her?" Mark asked. "Grace Miller?" Ethan reached for his pocket, then stopped. His phone was still broken from when he dropped it in the hospital. He had not replaced it yet. "No, but she's about 5'6". Dark hair, brown eyes." "She was thin." "Really thin." Mark nodded, writing. "Anything else? Distinguishing features? Tattoos? Scars?" "She has a scar on her left hand. From a kitchen accident when we were together." "Small, near her thumb." The pen scratched across the paper. Mark asked more questions. Where had Ethan last lived with Grace? Did she have family in the area? What kind of work did she do back then? Ethan answered as best he could, but so much of it felt distant, like a story about someone else's life. He had worked so hard to forget those years, to bury them under success and ambition. Now he was digging them up, and his hands were shaking. Finally, Mark set the pen down. He tore the top page from the legal pad and clipped it to a folder. He looked at Ethan, his gaze steady and calm. "I can do this," Mark said. "Find her. Find out where she's living, what she's doing. It'll take a few days, maybe a week." Relief flooded through Ethan, so sudden and strong it made him dizzy. "Thank you. But before I start," Mark continued, his voice hardening slightly, "you need to understand something." Ethan straightened. "What?" Mark leaned forward, his forearms on the desk. His eyes were serious, almost sad. "Once I find the truth, I'm going to give it to you. All of it. The good, the bad, the ugly. And you're going to have to live with it." Ethan's throat tightened. He nodded slowly. "A lot of people come to me wanting answers," Mark said. "But when they get them, they realize they weren't ready. They wanted a version of the truth that made them feel better. That's not how this works." "I understand," Ethan said. "Do you?" Mark's voice was quiet but firm. "Because once you open this door, you can't close it again. If Grace Miller is struggling, if those kids are suffering, you're going to know about it. You're going to carry that. And you need to be prepared to accept it before I go looking." The words hit Ethan like stones. He thought about Grace's voice, desperate and small. He thought about Lucas's hard face, Emma's thin jacket. He thought about the life he had built while they struggled alone. "If you want the truth," Mark said, "be prepared to accept it first." Ethan looked down at his hands. They were trembling again. He curled them into fists, pressed them against his thighs. When he looked up, his eyes were wet. "I'm prepared," he said. His voice cracked, but he did not look away. "I need to know." Mark held his gaze for a moment longer. Then he nodded. "All right." He stood, extending his hand across the desk. Ethan stood too, his legs unsteady. He shook Mark's hand. The grip was firm, grounding. "I'll call you when I have something," Mark said. "Give me your number." Ethan recited his number. Mark wrote it down in the margin of his notes. They stood there for a moment, two men in a cramped office at dawn, the weight of the unspoken hanging between them. "Thank you," Ethan said again. Mark nodded. "Go home, Mr. Cole. Try to rest." "This won't be easy." Ethan turned and walked to the door. His hand was on the knob when Mark spoke again. "Cole." Ethan looked back. Mark's expression was softer now, almost kind. "Whatever you find out, remember this. It's not about what you did 8 years ago. It's about what you do next." Ethan did not trust himself to speak. He nodded once and stepped out into the hallway. The morning light was brighter now, harsh and unforgiving. Ethan walked down the stairs, his footsteps echoing in the empty building. Outside, the city was waking up. People walked past, carrying coffee, talking on phones, living their lives. Ethan stood on the sidewalk and looked up at the faded sign above the door. Daniels and Associates. He had set something in motion. There was no going back now. Ethan walked to his car, got in, and sat there for a long time. His hands were still shaking. But beneath the fear, beneath the guilt, something else stirred. A small, fragile thing. Hope. 2 days felt like 2 years. Ethan went through the motions of his life. He attended board meetings. He answered emails. He smiled at investors and shook hands with partners. But inside, he was hollow. Every moment, he waited for the phone to ring. For Mark Daniels to call with the information he both needed and dreaded. The call came on a Wednesday afternoon. Ethan was in his office when his assistant buzzed him. "A Mr. Daniels online too." His hand froze over the phone. For a second, he considered not answering. He could hang up, walk away, pretend he had never gone to that shabby office downtown, go back to his life of glass towers and quarterly reports and meals that tasted like sand. But he could not. His hand moved on its own, picking up the receiver. "This is Cole. It's Mark Daniels. I have what you need. Can you come to my office?" Ethan's throat was dry. "When?" "Now, if you can." Ethan looked at his computer screen. 3 meetings scheduled for the afternoon. A conference call with Tokyo. A dinner with the CFO. None of it mattered. "I'll be there in 30 minutes." He hung up. His hands were shaking again. The drive downtown passed in a blur. Ethan barely remembered getting in his car, navigating the streets, parking outside the brick building. Before he knew it, he was climbing the creaking stairs, pushing open the frosted glass door. Mark sat behind his desk, the same coffee-stained mug in front of him. But today, there was something else. A manila folder, thick and worn, sitting in the center of the desk. Mark's hand rested on top of it, as if holding it in place. "Sit down, Mr. Cole." Ethan sat. His eyes were locked on the folder. It looked ordinary. Just paper and cardboard. But it felt like a bomb waiting to detonate. Mark did not speak right away. He studied Ethan's face, his expression unreadable. Finally, he lifted his hand and slid the folder across the desk. "Everything's in here," Mark said quietly. "I'll let you read it. If you have questions, I'll answer them." Ethan reached for the folder. His fingers touched the edge, and he felt a jolt run through him. This was it. The truth he had asked for. The life Grace had been living while he built his empire. He opened the folder. The first page was a summary sheet. Typed, single-spaced, clinical. Ethan's eyes scanned the words, and each one felt like a knife. Grace Miller, age 37, current residence Compton, California. Basement apartment on Rosecrans Avenue, Compton. The word hit him like a fist. He knew that neighborhood. Everyone in Los Angeles knew it. High crime, poverty, gang violence. Not the kind of place you raise children if you had any other choice. Ethan turned the page. The next sheet was a breakdown of Grace's employment. 3 jobs listed in stark black ink. Morning shift, 6 to 11 janitorial work at an office building, $11 per hour. Afternoon shift, noon to 6 cashier at a discount grocery store, $12 per hour. Evening shift, 7 to 11 waitress at a diner, $10 per hour plus tips. Ethan did the math in his head. 15 hours a day, 6 days a week, sometimes 7. Total monthly income approximately $1,400. $1,400. Ethan made more than that in an hour. His watch cost more than Grace earned in 2 months. The wine he ordered at business dinners could cover her grocery bill for a week. His stomach churned. He kept reading. The apartment rent was $850. That left $550 for everything else. Food, utilities, transportation, medical bills. Ethan turned another page. This one had photographs. His breath caught. The first photo showed a building. Old brick, weathered and cracked. A narrow staircase leading down to a basement entrance. The door was painted green, the paint peeling in patches. A single window, small and barred, sat at ground level. The glass was dirty, covered with a thin curtain from inside. The second photo showed the street. Cracked pavement. Graffiti on a nearby wall. A chain-link fence with weeds growing through the gaps. A shopping cart abandoned on the sidewalk. This was where they lived. Grace and Lucas and Emma. In a basement, below the street, hidden from the sun. Ethan's hands began to shake. He gripped the folder tighter, trying to steady himself. He turned to the next page. Information about Lucas. 14 years old. Enrolled at Compton High School. No extracurricular activities. No sports. No clubs. After school, he went to the public library and stayed until closing. He did his homework there. He read books about science and history. Sometimes he checked out college prep materials, studying alone at a scarred wooden table in the corner. He did not go to tutoring. He did not have SAT prep courses. He had no guidance counselor helping him apply to colleges. He had the library, and he had himself. And when he came home, he took care of his sister. Ethan turned the page, and his heart stopped. Emma, 11 years old. Chronic asthma. Diagnosed at age 6. Multiple emergency room visits in the past 2 years. 7 trips to UCLA Medical Center. 4 to County General. 2 to a free clinic in South Louisiana. The report listed dates and times. January 12th, 3 in the morning. April 23rd, midnight. August 7th, 6 in the evening. Each visit marked by the same pattern. Difficulty breathing. Wheezing. Panic. Grace rushing her daughter to whatever hospital was closest, holding Emma's small hand while the girl struggled for air. Treatment nebulizer, albuterol, sometimes steroids. Prescribed medication daily inhaler. Follow-up appointments recommended. And then, at the bottom of the page, a single line that made Ethan's vision blur. Patient discharged. Further treatment discontinued due to unpaid balance. Ethan stared at the words. He read them again, hoping he had misunderstood. But the meaning was clear. Emma needed treatment. Grace could not pay. The hospital turned them away. His hands were trembling so badly now that the pages rattled. He turned to the next sheet, and there it was. A photocopy of a medical billing statement. Patient Emma Miller. Date of service September 8th. Charges emergency room visit, nebulizer treatment, chest x-ray, physician consultation. Total amount due $2,347. Balance remaining $2,347. Status account delinquent. Treatment suspended pending payment. Ethan could not breathe. The air in the small office felt too thick, pressing in on him from all sides. He tried to swallow, but his throat was closed. His eyes burned. He thought about Emma in the hospital lobby, clutching her rabbit. Her thin jacket. Her wide, frightened eyes. She had been sick, struggling to breathe. And Grace had begged for one more day because she did not have the money to save her daughter. While Ethan sat in his office, surrounded by glass and steel and success. He turned the page, but he could barely see it now. His vision was swimming. The next few pages were more details. Grace's work schedules. Lucas's report cards, all A's and B's despite everything. A receipt from a second-hand clothing store. $14 for a jacket. Emma's jacket, probably the thin one Ethan had seen her wearing. He could not read anymore. The words blurred together, meaningless shapes on paper. He tried to close the folder, but his hands would not cooperate. They just hung there, useless and shaking. Across the desk, Mark sat in silence. He did not speak. He did not move. He just watched, his face grave. Ethan's head dropped forward. He stared at the open folder, at the photographs of the basement apartment. And the medical bills and the proof of a life lived in the shadows while he lived in the light. His shoulders curved inward. His breath came in short, shallow gasps. "Mr. Cole," Mark said quietly. Ethan did not look up. He could not. If he lifted his head, if he met Mark's eyes, he would break completely. And he could not break. Not here. Not yet. "Compton," Ethan whispered. His voice was barely audible. "Basement apartment." "Yes, Mark said. 15 hours a day. Yes. $1,400 a month. Mark did not answer this time. He did not need to. The silence was answer enough. Ethan reached out and touched the photocopied receipt. The one that said treatment discontinued. His finger traced the words, as if touching them could change them. But nothing changed. The words remained, cold and final. Emma could not breathe, and they had turned her away. Because Grace could not pay. Because Ethan had not been there. His hand fell away from the paper. He tried again to close the folder, but he could not do it. His fingers would not obey. The folder stayed open, the evidence of his failure spread across Mark's desk for both of them to see. Finally, after what felt like hours, Ethan's head bowed lower. His chin touched his chest. His eyes closed. He sat there, motionless, a successful man broken by the weight of a truth he should have known all along. Mark did not rush him. He sat across the desk, patient and quiet, while Ethan tried to remember how to breathe. Outside, the city continued its endless rhythm. Cars honked. People walked. The sun moved across the sky. Life went on. But inside that small office, time had stopped. And Ethan Cole, the man who had everything, realized he had nothing at all. Ethan returned to Novalink Technologies just before midnight. The parking garage was empty except for a few cars belonging to engineers working late shifts. His footsteps echoed off the concrete as he walked to the elevator. The building was quiet at this hour, stripped of its daytime energy. Just glass and steel and darkness. He rode the elevator to the top floor alone. The doors opened, and he stepped into the silent corridor. Motion sensor lights flickered on as he walked, creating pools of brightness that followed him like ghosts. His office door was locked. He pressed his thumb to the scanner, heard the click, pushed it open. The city sprawled below, a million lights burning in the night. Ethan did not look at it. He went straight to his desk, sat down, and woke his computer. The screen glowed blue in the darkness. He knew what he needed to do. The question had haunted him since he left Mark's office. Grace had called the hospital, begged for help, mentioned Emma was sick. But she had never called him. Never reached out. Or had she? Ethan's fingers moved across the keyboard. He logged into the company's internal server, the secure network that backed up everything. Emails, documents, phone records. Novalink monitored all communications for security purposes, stored everything in encrypted files. It was standard practice for tech companies, a safeguard against corporate espionage. But it also meant that nothing disappeared. Every call, every message, every contact was preserved somewhere in the digital archive. Ethan navigated through folders, past security clearances, into the personal data backups. His heart was pounding now. He found his own records, 8 years of phone logs stretching back to when he first became CEO. He selected the date range. Opened the file. A list appeared. Thousands of entries. Incoming calls, outgoing calls, text messages, numbers and timestamps scrolling down the screen in endless rows. Ethan's mouth was dry. He opened the search function and typed in Grace's old number. The one he still remembered, even after all these years. The screen flickered. Then results appeared. Ethan's breath stopped. 43 entries. 43 times Grace had tried to reach him over the past 8 years. The first call was dated 7 years ago, March 19th. The last was 6 months ago, September 11th. 43 times she had reached out. And he had never known. Ethan clicked on the first entry. A text message. The timestamp read 2:15 in the afternoon. Ethan, I know it's been a while. I need to talk to you. It's important. Please call me back. He clicked the next one. 2 days later. Ethan, please. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't urgent. I need help. The next one. A week after that. The baby is sick. I don't know what to do. Please. The baby. Emma. 7 years ago, when she was still small. When the asthma first started. Ethan's hand was shaking as he clicked through the messages. They came in clusters. Desperate bursts followed by long silences. Some were just a few words. Others were longer, pleading. Emma has been in the hospital 3 times this month. I can't afford the bills. Please, Ethan. I know you're busy, but I need help. Just this once. Lucas asks about you. I don't know what to tell him. The rent is late again. I'm working 3 jobs and it's not enough. Emma's medication costs $200 a month. Insurance won't cover it. Each message was a knife. Ethan read them in order, watching Grace's hope slowly die. The early messages were cautious, almost apologetic. The later ones were raw, stripped of pride. And then, toward the end, they became something else. Not angry. Just tired. I won't bother you anymore. I understand. We'll figure it out on our own. Goodbye, Ethan. The last message was dated 6 months ago. After that, nothing. Silence. Ethan stared at the screen. His vision was blurring, the words swimming together. She had called over and over for years, and he had never received a single message. Not one. How was that possible? He clicked on the phone logs. Voice calls showed the same pattern. Grace's number appeared again and again. Each call lasted 0 seconds. No connection. No ring. They had been blocked before they reached him. Ethan's stomach dropped. Someone had filtered these. Someone had seen Grace's messages and calls and deliberately kept them from him. This was not an accident. This was intentional. He stood up from his desk, his legs unsteady. The office felt too small suddenly, the walls pressing in. He walked to the door and opened it. The hallway was still empty, still lit by those cold automatic lights. He walked down the corridor to another office. The nameplate on the door read Kyle Chin, Executive Assistant. Ethan did not knock. He opened the door and turned on the lights. Kyle's office was neat, organized. A standing desk with 2 monitors. A filing cabinet. Photos of Kyle's family on the wall, his wife and 2 daughters smiling at the camera. Ethan walked to the desk and logged into Kyle's computer using his CEO override password. The system let him in without hesitation. Ethan opened Kyle's email client and searched for Grace's name. His hands were trembling so badly he mistyped it twice before getting it right. Results appeared. Dozens of emails. All from Grace. All forwarded to Kyle with a note at the top. Handle per standing instructions. Do not forward to Mr. Cole. Ethan clicked on one. Then another. The pattern was the same. Grace's desperate messages, intercepted, filed away, hidden. And at the top of each one, that same instruction. Standing instructions. Someone had given Kyle orders to block Grace's calls, to filter her messages, to make sure Ethan never saw them. And Kyle had obeyed. Ethan's hands clenched into fists. He wanted to scream, to smash the monitors, to tear the office apart. But he did not. He stood there, shaking, staring at the screen. The office door opened behind him. Mr. Cole. Ethan turned. Kyle stood in the doorway, wearing jeans and a t-shirt. He must have been working late in the server room. His face was pale, his eyes wide. He looked at Ethan, then at the computer screen, and his expression crumbled. I can explain, Kyle said quietly. Explain. Ethan's voice was flat, emotionless. It scared him how calm he sounded. You blocked her calls for 8 years. Kyle's mouth opened, then closed. He took a step into the office, his hands raised slightly, placating. I was following orders, Mr. Cole. I was told to filter certain contacts. To protect your time. You were busy, the company was growing, and she said her daughter was sick, Ethan interrupted. His voice was rising now, cracking. She said she needed help. I know. Kyle's voice broke. He looked down at his feet. I know. I'm sorry. Who gave you the orders? Kyle did not answer. He stood there, silent, his shoulders hunched. Ethan took a step toward him. Who? Kyle? Kyle's face twisted. He looked like he might cry. I can't. Tell me. She'll fire me. She'll destroy my career. I have a family, Mr. Cole. I have kids. Who? The word came out like a whip. Kyle flinched. His lips trembled. Finally, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said the name. Rachel Hart. The room tilted. Ethan's vision narrowed to a single point. Rachel. His partner. His investor. His lover. The woman who had been by his side for the past 6 years, who had funded his company's expansion, who shared his bed and his life and his success. Rachel had done this. She said it was for your own good, Kyle continued, the words spilling out now. She said Grace was trying to manipulate you, to distract you from your work. She said you needed to focus on the company, not on the past. She told me to handle all communications from Grace, to never let them reach you. And I did. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Ethan could not speak. His throat was closed. His hands were shaking so badly he had to grip the edge of the desk to steady himself. Rachel, the woman he trusted, the woman he thought loved him. She had taken Grace's calls, Grace's desperate pleas for help, and hidden them like trash. Kyle was still talking, making excuses, but Ethan could not hear him anymore. The words were just noise. All he could hear was Grace's voice, the messages he had just read echoing in his mind. Please, Ethan. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't urgent. Emma has been in the hospital. I won't bother you anymore. Ethan turned and walked out of the office. Kyle called after him, but he did not stop. He walked down the hallway, his footsteps heavy and slow. His vision was blurred again, the walls wavering. He reached his office, grabbed his jacket, and kept walking past the elevator, down the emergency stairs, through the empty lobby, out into the night. The air was cold. Ethan stood in the parking garage, breathing hard. His chest ached. His eyes burned. He wanted to hit something, to break something, to scream until his voice gave out. But instead, he just stood there, alone in the darkness. While somewhere across the city, in a basement apartment in Compton, Grace was probably awake too, working another shift, worrying about bills, taking care of children who thought their father had abandoned them. And he had, not intentionally. But the result was the same. Ethan got into his car. He sat behind the wheel, his hands gripping it tight. In his pocket, his phone buzzed. He pulled it out. A text from Rachel. "Where are you? We need to talk about tomorrow's presentation." Ethan stared at the message. His thumb hovered over the screen. Then, slowly, he typed the reply. "We need to talk now." Rachel's apartment was in Pacific Heights, the kind of place where old money lived quietly behind stone walls and iron gates. Ethan pulled up to the building at 1 in the morning. The streets were empty, lit by amber streetlights that cast long shadows across the pavement. He sat in his car for a moment, staring at the entrance. His hands were still shaking. They had not stopped since he left the office. He got out and walked to the door, pressed the buzzer, waited. The night air was cold, biting through his jacket. Somewhere down the street, a car alarm went off, then stopped. The silence that followed felt heavy, oppressive. Rachel's voice came through the intercom, sleepy and confused. "Ethan? What are you doing here? Let me in." There was a pause. Then the lock clicked. Ethan pushed through the door and took the elevator to the 5th floor. The hallway was carpeted in deep burgundy, the walls painted cream. Soft lighting glowed from sconces. Everything was tasteful, expensive, controlled. His footsteps made no sound on the thick carpet. The only noise was his breathing, harsh and uneven. Rachel's door was already open when he reached it. She stood in the doorway wearing a silk robe, her dark hair loose around her shoulders. She was 42 years old, beautiful in the way that power and money made people beautiful. Her skin was perfect, her nails manicured, her posture straight. Even at 1 in the morning, she looked composed. But her eyes were sharp, calculating. She studied Ethan's face, and something shifted in her expression. A weariness crept in, subtle but unmistakable. "Come in," she said quietly. Ethan stepped inside. The apartment was exactly like Rachel. Minimalist furniture, abstract art on the walls, a wall of windows overlooking the city. Everything arranged to impress, nothing out of place. The living room smelled faintly of her perfume, something expensive he could never remember the name of. A laptop sat open on the coffee table, the screen dark. A half-empty wine glass rested beside it. Signs of a normal evening, interrupted. He did not sit down. He stood in the middle of the living room, his fists clenched at his sides. His jaw was tight. His whole body felt coiled, ready to explode. Rachel closed the door and turned to face him. She crossed her arms, leaning against the wall. Her posture was casual, but her eyes were alert. She was already calculating, already preparing her defense. "What's wrong?" "Grace Miller." Rachel's expression did not change. Not even a flicker. Her face remained smooth, unreadable. "Who?" "Don't." Ethan's voice was low, dangerous. Each word came out like a stone. "Don't lie to me." Rachel watched him for a moment. Her eyes narrowed slightly, weighing her options. Then she sighed, a small sound of resignation, and walked past him to the kitchen. She poured herself a glass of water from a crystal pitcher, took a sip. Her movements were slow, deliberate. She was buying time, composing herself. When she turned back, her face was calm. Perfectly calm. "All right." "Grace Miller." "What about her?" "You blocked her calls." Rachel set the glass down on the counter. The sound was sharp in the quiet apartment. She did not flinch. Did not look away. "Yes." The admission hit Ethan like a punch. Even though he had known, even though Kyle had told him, hearing Rachel say it out loud made it real. His breath came faster. His hands trembled. He pressed them flat against his thighs, trying to steady them. "For 8 years." "Yes." Her voice was steady, matter of fact, like she was confirming a business transaction, not admitting to destroying lives. Ethan felt something crack inside him. A dam breaking. All the anger he had been holding back rushed forward. "She called me, texted me, begged for help. And you made sure I never saw any of it." Rachel's eyes were cold now. Not angry. Just cold. Like she was looking at a business problem, not a person. Like this conversation was an inconvenience, nothing more. I did. Why? She picked up her glass again and took another sip. The crystal caught the light, refracting it into tiny rainbows on the counter. She set it down carefully, precisely. Then she looked at Ethan, her gaze steady and unblinking. Because that woman is your weakness. The words were like ice, sharp and cutting. Ethan stared at her, unable to speak. His throat had closed up. His chest felt tight. Rachel set the glass down and stepped closer. Her voice was soft but firm, the way she spoke in boardrooms when she was making a point no one could argue with. The way she spoke when she knew she was right and everyone else was wrong. When I met you 6 years ago, you were brilliant, driven, focused. You had a vision for Novalink that could change the industry. But you also had baggage. She gestured vaguely, as if Grace and her children were just an inconvenient detail. Something easily dismissed. This woman from your past. This life you left behind. And it was dragging you down. Ethan's hands clenched into fists. His nails bit into his palms. She needed help. Her daughter was sick. I know. Rachel's tone did not change. Flat. Clinical. I read every message. Every voicemail. I knew exactly what she wanted. The image of Rachel reading Grace's desperate pleas made Ethan's stomach turn. He imagined her sitting at her desk, scrolling through messages about Emma's hospital visits, about unpaid bills, about children asking for their father, and then deleting them, archiving them, making them disappear. Then how could you? Because you couldn't afford the distraction. Rachel stepped closer. She was inches from him now, her eyes locked on his. Her voice dropped lower, more intimate. You were building something important. Novalink was growing. Investors were watching. One mistake, one moment of weakness, and it all could have collapsed. I wasn't going to let that happen. Ethan's jaw tightened. His teeth ground together. So you decided for me? Yes. Rachel did not look away. Did not hesitate. I decided. And I was right. Look at what you've accomplished. Look at what Novalink has become. Do you think you could have done that if you were worrying about some woman in Compton? If you were distracted by children you didn't even know existed? The logic was cold, ruthless. And part of Ethan understood it. That was the worst part. Part of him understood exactly how Rachel had justified this to herself. How she had convinced herself she was doing the right thing. They're my children, Ethan said. His voice cracked. Lucas and Emma. They're mine. For the first time, something flickered in Rachel's eyes. Surprise, maybe, or discomfort. But it vanished quickly, replaced by that same cold calculation. She tilted her head slightly, studying him like he was a puzzle she needed to solve. You don't know that. I do. You haven't taken a paternity test. You haven't even spoken to her. You're making assumptions based on what? A resemblance? A feeling? Rachel shook her head slowly, almost pityingly. That's not proof, Ethan. That's emotion. And emotion is what I protected you from. The words hit him like a slap. Because she was right. He did not have proof. He had not spoken to Grace. He had not asked Lucas if he was his son. All he had was a face that looked like his own and a gut feeling that would not go away. A certainty that lived in his bones but had no evidence to support it. His certainty wavered. Just for a moment. But Rachel saw it. Her expression shifted, sensing an opening. You had no right, Ethan said. But his voice was quieter now. Less sure. I had every right. I'm your partner. I've invested millions in your company. I've stood by you through every crisis, every setback, every late night and impossible deadline. I've given you everything. She paused. And I wasn't going to let some ghost from your past ruin it. Ethan wanted to argue, wanted to scream at her. But doubt had crept in, cold and insidious. What if he was wrong? What if Lucas was not his son? What if he was about to upend his entire life based on nothing but a hunch? But then he remembered Grace's voice. Emma's thin jacket. The unpaid medical bills. She's not a ghost. She's real. She's suffering. She made her choices. For who? For me? Or for you? The question hung in the air. Rachel's face was stone. For us. Everything I did was for us. But Ethan saw through it now. The mask had slipped just enough. This was not about protecting him. This was about control. About keeping him focused where she wanted him. About making sure nothing interfered with her investment. There is no us, Rachel. Her composure cracked. Just slightly. That's not fair. Ethan stepped back, putting distance between them. His decision was made. You should have told me. You should have given me the choice. Rachel's voice rose. And what would you have done? Ethan did not answer. He could not. The question echoed in his mind as he turned toward the door. I'm going to find them. Rachel's eyes were cold again. Do what you want, Ethan. But don't come crying to me when it falls apart. Ethan walked out without looking back. The night air hit him like a wave. He stood on the street, breathing hard. His phone was in his pocket. He pulled it out and typed in the address. Rosecrans Avenue, Compton. The map loaded. A pin dropped on a narrow street. Ethan stared at it, his thumb hovering over the screen. Do I have the right to knock on that door? The question had no answer. But the address was there, waiting. Compton looked different at night. Street lights flickered weakly or did not work at all, casting uneven shadows across the pavement. Ethan drove slowly down Rosecrans Avenue, following the blue line on his GPS through streets he had never traveled. Graffiti covered the walls in sprawling tags. Chain link fences bordered empty lots filled with weeds and abandoned furniture. Men stood on corners, watching his car pass with eyes that missed nothing. One of them said something to the others. They laughed, the sound sharp and mocking. His hands were tight on the steering wheel. He did not belong here. His car was too new, too expensive. His clothes were pressed and clean. Every turn felt like trespassing into a world that did not want him. The GPS led him off the main road onto a narrow side street. The alley was darker than anything he had seen before. No street lights here, just the faint glow from windows and the occasional flicker of televisions behind thin curtains. Old brick buildings pressed close on either side, their paint peeling, their roofs sagging. Trash cans lined the curb, some tipped over, their contents spilled across the sidewalk. A cat darted across the pavement, eyes flashing green in his headlights before disappearing into shadow. Ethan parked at the entrance to the alley and turned off the engine. The sudden silence was oppressive. He could hear his own breathing, fast and shallow. His heart hammered against his ribs. He forced himself to release the steering wheel, but his fingers ached from gripping it so hard. On the passenger seat sat a shopping bag from an upscale department store. He had stopped on the way here, wandering the aisles in a daze while salespeople watched with polite curiosity. What do you bring to a family you abandoned? What could possibly make up for 8 years of absence? He had grabbed things without thinking. Toys for Emma, books for Lucas, a scarf for Grace. Standing in the checkout line, it had seemed like the right thing to do. Now it felt ridiculous, inadequate. But he had nothing else to offer. Nothing but apologies and a bag full of things they did not need. Ethan picked up the bag and got out of the car. The air was cool, carrying the smell of cooking oil and car exhaust mixed with something sweet and rotten. Somewhere nearby, a dog barked angrily. Music thumped from an open window above, bass heavy and distorted. He locked the car and walked down the alley, his footsteps echoing off the brick walls. The building was halfway down, exactly as Mark's photos had shown. Old brick. A narrow staircase leading down to a basement entrance. The door was painted green, though most of the paint had peeled away in long strips. A single window sat at ground level, small and barred, covered by a thin curtain that glowed faintly from a light inside. Shadows moved behind it. Someone was home. His family was home. He stood at the top of the stairs, looking down. The steps were cracked concrete with weeds growing through the gaps. A rusted handrail ran along one side. The door had no doorbell, just a simple knob and a dented metal frame. His heart was pounding. His mouth was dry. He had rehearsed what he would say 100 times during the drive. Now all the words had vanished. His mind was blank. He descended the stairs. Each step felt too loud. At the bottom, he stood before the door, hand shaking as he raised it to knock. Behind that door were the people he had abandoned. The woman he had loved and left. The children he had never met. They had built a life without him. What right did he have to knock? But he had come this far. He knocked 3 times. Sharp and final. For a moment, nothing happened. Then he heard footsteps inside. Slow, cautious. A lock clicked. The door opened a crack, and a face appeared. Grace. She looked older. Lines creased the corners of her eyes. Her hair was tied back in a messy bun, strands escaping around her face. She wore an old sweater, sleeves pushed up to her elbows. Her hands were chapped and red, the skin rough from years of harsh work. But her eyes were the same, brown and deep. Now they were hard, cold as stone. When she saw him, her expression did not change. No surprise, no joy, just resignation. She opened the door wider and stood in the doorway, arms crossed over her chest. She did not invite him in. Why now? The question was quiet but devastating. Ethan's throat closed. Why now? Because he had seen her at the hospital. Because guilt had finally caught up with him. But none of that felt like enough. I needed to see you. Grace's expression did not soften. 8 years. You needed 8 years to decide that? Behind her, a shadow moved. A boy stepped into view. Lucas. He was tall, nearly as tall as Grace. Faded t-shirt and jeans. Bare feet. His face was hard, guarded. He looked so much like Ethan it was like staring into a mirror from 25 years ago. But his eyes were different. Too old for a boy of 14. Eyes that had learned not to trust. Grace still did not look away from Ethan. Her voice was flat. No one important. The words were a knife. Ethan flinched. Lucas stepped closer, studying Ethan with open suspicion. His arms crossed over his chest, mirroring his mother. Father and son, though neither acknowledged it. Lucas's lip curled. "We're strangers now." His voice was cold, clinical, like he was stating a simple fact. Ethan's chest tightened. He wanted to argue, to explain, to beg for a chance. But Lucas was right. They were strangers. 8 years had made sure of that. Ethan lifted the shopping bag slightly, hands trembling. The gesture felt pathetic even as he made it. Grace looked at the bag, then back at his face. Lucas's jaw tightened. "We don't need your charity." Behind them, another figure appeared in the hallway. Small and pale. Emma. She wore pink pajamas with cartoon characters printed on them, the fabric thin and faded. Her dark hair was messy, tangled from sleep. She held her stuffed rabbit against her chest, small fingers tight in its worn fur. When she saw Ethan standing in the doorway, her eyes went wide. Not with recognition, with fear. She did not know him. To her, he was just a stranger at the door. A man in the night. Something to be afraid of. Grace turned immediately, her maternal instinct overriding everything else. She stepped back and put her arm around Emma's shoulders, pulling her daughter close. Her voice was soft now, protective. "It's okay, baby. He's just leaving." Emma stared at Ethan, her face pale, her rabbit clutched tighter. She shrank back against her mother. To her, Ethan was not a father. He was a threat. The realization broke something inside Ethan. His daughter looked at him with fear. His son called him a stranger. The woman he had loved wanted him gone. He had come here hoping for forgiveness, for understanding, for a chance to make things right. There was no making this right. The shopping bag slipped from his fingers. It hit the ground with a dull thud, items spilling across the concrete. A book. A toy car. The scarf, still wrapped in tissue paper. They looked ridiculous lying there in the dirt, expensive things in a place where they did not belong. No one moved to pick them up. Ethan stood frozen, staring at the spilled contents. His throat was tight. His eyes burned. He tried to speak, to say something, anything. But his voice was gone. Grace's expression softened slightly. Not with forgiveness. With pity. And somehow that was worse than anger would have been. "Go home, Ethan. There's nothing for you here." The words were quiet but final. Lucas's face was still hard. Emma had buried her face in Grace's side, refusing to look at him. The door was open, but it felt like a wall. Ethan took a step back. Then another. His legs barely held him. He turned and climbed the stairs. Each step was an effort. His vision was blurred. Behind him, he heard the door close. The sound was soft but absolute. He reached his car and got in. His hands shook as he gripped the wheel. Emma's frightened face flashed in his mind. His daughter was afraid of him. Ethan's head dropped forward against the steering wheel. His shoulders shook. His breath came in ragged gasps. And in the darkness of that Compton alley, for the first time in 8 years, Ethan Cole allowed himself to cry. The tears came hard and fast. Years of regret pouring out. He cried for the time he had lost. For the children who did not know him. For the woman who had given up on him. For the man he had become and the man he should have been. When the tears finally stopped, Ethan sat up. His face was wet. His eyes were red. He looked at himself in the rearview mirror and barely recognized the man staring back. He started the car and drove away. In the mirror, the alley disappeared into darkness. The green door vanished. But the weight of what had happened stayed with him. Heavy and unforgiving. A burden he would carry for the rest of his life. Or until he found a way to earn the right to knock on that door again. 3 days passed. 3 days of Ethan going through the motions of his life while his mind was somewhere else. He attended meetings but did not hear what was said. He signed documents without reading them. He sat in his office and stared out the window at the city below, seeing nothing. At night, he drove to Compton. Not to knock on the door. Just to sit in his car at the end of the alley, watching the faint light behind the curtained window. Sometimes he saw shadows moving inside. Sometimes he imagined he could hear voices. He never got out of the car. He just watched, like a ghost haunting the life he had lost. On the third day, his phone rang while he was in a board meeting. He ignored it. It rang again and again. Finally, he excused himself and stepped into the hallway. The number was not one he recognized. He answered anyway. "Mr. Cole?" A woman's voice, Professional and urgent. This is UCLA Medical Center. We have Emma Miller here in the emergency room. Her mother listed you as an emergency contact. The words did not make sense at first. Then they hit him like a truck. Emma. Emergency room. His hands went cold. What happened? She collapsed at school. She's having severe difficulty breathing. The doctor will explain more when you arrive. Can you come? Ethan was already moving down the hallway, past his assistant, into the elevator. I am on my way. The drive to UCLA took 23 minutes. It felt like hours. Ethan ran red lights. He cut off other cars. His hands were wide on the steering wheel. His chest was so tight he could barely breathe. Emma collapsed. Severe difficulty breathing. The words repeated in his mind like a drumbeat. He abandoned his car in a loading zone and ran through the automatic doors into the emergency room. The same lobby where he had seen Grace just days ago. The same reception desk. But now everything looked different. Sharper. More real. Emma Miller. He gasped to the woman behind the desk. Where is she? The receptionist checked her computer. Room 12. Through those doors. Turn left. Ethan ran. His shoes squeaked on the linoleum floor. Nurses looked up as he passed. He found room 12 and stopped in the doorway, his breath catching in his throat. Emma lay in a hospital bed, small and pale against the white sheets. An oxygen mask covered her nose and mouth. Wires ran from her chest to a machine that beeped steadily. Her eyes were closed. Her stuffed rabbit sat beside her pillow, its worn ears flopped to one side. Grace stood beside the bed, holding Emma's hand. Her face was drawn, her eyes red from crying. She wore the same old sweater from the other night. Her hair was pulled back in a hasty ponytail. When she heard Ethan in the doorway, she looked up. For a moment, their eyes met. No anger, no coldness, just fear. Raw and overwhelming. Lucas sat in a plastic chair in the corner, his elbows on his knees, his head in his hands. He did not look up when Ethan entered. A doctor stood at the foot of the bed, reviewing a chart. She was in her 50s, with gray streak through her dark hair. Her white coat was crisp and clean. Her name tag read Dr. Sarah Chen. She glanced at Ethan, then back at Grace. Are you the father? Dr. Chen asked. Ethan's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Grace spoke instead, her voice hollow. Yes. The doctor nodded and set the chart down. Her expression was serious. Professional but kind. Emma's pneumonia has progressed to a severe stage. The infection has spread to both lungs. Her oxygen levels are critically low. Grace's hand tightened on Emma's. But she'll be okay, right? You can give her antibiotics? Dr. Chen's face was grave. Antibiotics alone won't be enough. The fluid buildup in her lungs is too extensive. She needs surgery to drain it. Without the procedure, her condition will continue to deteriorate. The word surgery hung in the air like a blade. Grace's face went pale. Her lips trembled. She looked down at Emma's small form in the bed, at the rise and fall of her daughter's chest under the oxygen mask. How soon? Grace whispered. As soon as possible. Tonight, if we can get her scheduled. Grace nodded slowly. She released Emma's hand and reached for her purse on the chair beside Lucas. Her hands shook as she opened it. She pulled out a worn wallet. The leather cracked and faded. She opened it and stared inside. Ethan could see from where he stood. A few bills. Maybe $40. Some change. Grace's fingers moved through the wallet, checking every pocket, every fold, as if hoping to find money that was not there. Her face crumpled. She looked up at the doctor, and Ethan saw the exact moment her composure broke. How much will it cost? Dr. Chen's expression softened. The surgery and hospital stay will be approximately $15,000. We can work with you on a payment plan, but we'll need at least 30% upfront to schedule the procedure. $4,500. Grace closed her wallet slowly. Her hands were shaking so badly she almost dropped it. Tears spilled down her cheeks. She looked at Emma, then at the doctor, then back at Emma. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. What could she say? That she did not have it? That she worked 3 jobs and still could not afford to save her daughter's life? Ethan could not watch anymore. He stepped into the room, pulling his wallet from his jacket. I'll pay. 3 heads turned toward him. Grace's eyes were wide. Lucas sat up straight, his face hard. Dr. Chen looked between them, confused but pragmatic. I'll cover the entire cost, Ethan said. His voice was steady now. Certain. Whatever she needs. Surgery, hospital stay, medication, everything. He pulled out his credit card and handed it to the doctor. She took it, nodded, and stepped out of the room to process the payment. The door closed behind her, leaving the 4 of them alone. Grace stared at Ethan. Her face was a storm of emotions. Relief, gratitude, anger, shame. She opened her mouth to speak, but Lucas beat her to it. That's it? Lucas's voice cracked. He stood up, his fists clenched at his sides. Tears streamed down his face, but his expression was furious. You just swipe a card and everything's fixed? Ethan turned to face him. Lucas, you think money solves everything? Lucas shouted. The words came out raw, jagged with pain. You think you can just show up now and make it all okay? Where were you when she was sick last year? Where were you when Mom worked 16-hour days to pay for her medicine? Where were you when Emma cried herself to sleep because she couldn't breathe? Each question was a punch. Ethan stood there, taking them, unable to respond. Because Lucas was right. Money did not solve everything. It did not erase 8 years of absence. It did not undo the nights Emma spent in pain while he slept in his penthouse. It did not give back the childhood Lucas spent raising himself because Ethan was not there. Lucas, stop. Grace's voice was quiet but firm. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Just stop. Lucas's chest heaved. His face was red and wet with tears. He looked at his mother, then at Ethan, then back at Emma in the bed. His shoulders sagged. He sank back into the chair and buried his face in his hands again. His body shook with silent sobs. Grace walked over to Ethan. She stopped a few feet away, maintaining distance. Her eyes met his. They were still red from crying, still full of fear for Emma. But there was something else there now. Something softer. This time, her voice was barely audible. She swallowed hard and tried again. Thank you. 2 words. Simple and quiet. But they carried the weight of everything unsaid. Thank you for paying. Thank you for coming. Thank you for finally being here when it mattered most. Ethan's eyes burned. His throat was so tight he could not speak. He nodded once, afraid that if he tried to say anything, he would break completely. A tear slipped down his cheek. He did not wipe it away. Grace watched him for a moment longer. Then she turned back to Emma's bed. She picked up her daughter's small hand and held it gently, careful not to disturb the 4th line. She leaned down and pressed a kiss to Emma's forehead, just above the oxygen mask. Ethan stood there, useless and shaking. He looked at Emma, so small and fragile in the hospital bed. He looked at Lucas, broken and crying in the corner. He looked at Grace, exhausted and terrified but still standing. This was his family. The family he had abandoned. The family he had failed. And for the first time, he had done something right. Dr. Chen returned with a clipboard. The payment is processed. We'll prep Emma for surgery within the hour. You can wait in the family room on the 3rd floor. Grace nodded. She did not let go of Emma's hand. Ethan stepped back toward the door. He did not belong here. In this moment, this was Grace's place. Lucas's place. He was still an outsider. But as he turned to leave, Grace spoke without looking at him. You can stay, if you want. The words stopped him. He looked back. Grace was still focused on Emma, but her voice had been genuine. Not warm, not forgiving, but not cold either. Ethan swallowed hard. I'll be in the waiting room. He walked out into the hallway. His legs were unsteady. He found a chair against the wall and sat down heavily. His hands were still shaking. His eyes were still wet. Down the hall, through the window of room 12. He could see Grace holding Emma's hand. He could see Lucas sitting with his head bowed. His family fighting for life while he sat on the outside looking in. But Grace had said he could stay. That had to mean something. It had to be a start. Ethan closed his eyes and, for the first time in days, allowed himself to hope. The surgery took 4 hours. 4 hours of Ethan sitting in the 3rd floor waiting room, staring at the clock on the wall. Grace sat across from him, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes fixed on nothing. Lucas paced back and forth near the window, unable to sit still. None of them spoke. The only sounds were the soft hum of fluorescent lights and the occasional page over the hospital intercom. When Dr. Chen finally emerged through the double doors, still in her surgical scrubs, all 3 of them stood at once. The doctor's face was tired but calm. She pulled down her mask and smiled slightly. The surgery went well. We drained the fluid and cleared the infection. Emma's breathing has already improved significantly. She'll need to stay here for a few days, but she should make a full recovery. Grace's knees buckled. Ethan moved instinctively, catching her arm to steady her. She did not pull away. Lucas exhaled sharply, his head dropping back as relief flooded through him. For a moment, they were just 3 people united by the same fear, the same hope. Can we see her? Grace asked, her voice shaking. She's in recovery now. Give us 30 minutes to get her settled in a room, then you can visit. Dr. Chen left. Grace sank back into her chair, her hands covering her face. Her shoulders shook. She was crying, but this time it was different. Not despair. Relief. Lucas sat down beside her and put his arm around her shoulders. Mother and son, holding each other up. Ethan stood apart, watching. He did not belong in that embrace. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But he was grateful to witness it. Grateful that Emma would be okay. That was enough. It had to be. 30 minutes later, they were led to a private room on the 4th floor. Emma lay in the bed, her eyes closed, her breathing steady and clear. The oxygen mask was gone, replaced by a thin tube under her nose. Her rabbit was tucked under her arm. She looked peaceful. Safe. Grace pulled a chair close to the bed and took his hand gently. Lucas stood at the foot of the bed, his arms crossed, his expression softer than Ethan had ever seen it. Ethan remained near the door, giving them space. The room was quiet. Peaceful. Outside the window, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. It felt like the first moment of calm any of them had experienced in days. Then the door opened. Ethan turned. His whole body went rigid. Rachel stood in the doorway. She wore a sleek black coat and heels, her hair perfectly styled, her makeup flawless. She looked out of place in the sterile hospital room, too polished, too composed. Her eyes swept the room, taking in the scene. Emma in the bed, Grace beside her, Lucas at the foot, and Ethan by the door. Her expression hardened. "So this is where you've been." Her voice was sharp, accusatory. Grace looked up, confused. Lucas straightened, his guard immediately up. Ethan said nothing. He just stared at Rachel, his jaw tight. Rachel stepped into the room, letting the door close behind her. She crossed her arms and looked at Grace with barely concealed disdain. "You again." "I should have known." Grace's face flushed. She opened her mouth to respond, but Ethan spoke first. "Get out, Rachel." Rachel's eyes snapped to him. "Excuse me?" "You heard me. Get out." She laughed, the sound cold and sharp. "I've been trying to reach you for 3 days. Your assistant said you left a board meeting without explanation. I find you here, with her, and you're telling me to leave?" Ethan's hand moved to his pocket. His fingers closed around his phone. Before coming to the hospital, he had prepared for this. He had known Rachel would find him eventually. And he had made sure he was ready. "You blocked her calls," Ethan said quietly. His voice was steady now. "Controlled. For 8 years. You kept me from knowing about Emma. About Lucas. You made that decision for me." Rachel's expression did not change. "We've already discussed this." "I did what was necessary." "Say it again." "What?" "Say it again. Here. Now. In front of everyone." Rachel's eyes narrowed. She sensed a trap but could not see it. Her pride would not let her back down. She lifted her chin. "Fine. Yes. I blocked her calls. I filtered her messages. I made sure you never saw them. And I'd do it again." Her voice was cold, certain, unapologetic. Ethan pulled out his phone. He tapped the screen once. Rachel's voice filled the room, clear and damning. "Yes. I blocked her calls. I filtered her messages. I made sure you never saw them. And I'd do it again." The recording played back her own words. Then it continued, pulling from the conversation in her apartment 3 nights ago. "That woman is your weakness. I wasn't going to let some ghost from your past ruin everything we built. I did what was necessary for us." The voice was unmistakably Rachel's. Every word cold and calculated. The recording ended, and silence filled the room. Rachel's face had gone pale. Her eyes were wide, her mouth slightly open. She looked at the phone in Ethan's hand, then at him. "You recorded me?" "I did." "That's illegal." "California is a 2-party consent state," Ethan said calmly. "But I don't plan to use this in court. I just wanted everyone here to understand exactly what kind of person you are." Rachel's composure cracked. Her face flushed red. "You manipulative." The door opened again. A nurse stepped in, carrying a tray of medication. She froze, sensing the tension. Behind her, another nurse poked her head in, curious. In the hallway, a family waiting to visit another patient had stopped, drawn by the raised voices. Rachel's recorded voice had been loud enough to carry. They had heard it. All of them. The first nurse looked at Rachel with an expression of disgust. She did not say anything, but she did not need to. The judgment was clear in her eyes. She shook her head slowly and moved to Emma's bedside, checking her vitals with deliberate focus, pointedly ignoring Rachel. In the hallway, the family whispered among themselves. An older woman shook her head. A man frowned. They knew what they had heard. A woman who had deliberately kept a mother from reaching the father of her sick child. The cruelty of it was inescapable. Rachel stood frozen, her face burning with humiliation. She looked around the room, at the nurses, at the family in the hallway, at Grace and Lucas watching her with cold eyes. She tried to speak, but no words came out. Her carefully constructed composure had shattered. Finally, she looked at Ethan. Her voice was low, venomous. "You'll regret this." "I already regret everything," Ethan said quietly. "But not this." Rachel turned and walked out. Her heels clicked sharply against the linoleum floor, the sound echoing down the hallway. She did not look back. The door swung shut behind her, and she was gone. The room fell silent again. The nurse finished checking Emma's vitals and left without a word. The family in the hallway moved on. Slowly, the world returned to normal. But nothing felt normal. Ethan stood by the door, his phone still in his hand. His whole body was shaking. He had just burned every bridge with Rachel, his investor, his partner, the woman who had funded Novalink's expansion. There would be consequences. She would pull her money. She would turn other investors against him. She might even try to force him out of his own company. But he did not care. Not anymore. He looked at Grace. She was staring at him, her expression unreadable. Shock, maybe, or disbelief. He could not tell. Lucas stood beside her, his arms still crossed, but his face had softened slightly. Ethan took a step forward, then another. He stopped a few feet from Grace, careful to maintain distance. His hands hung at his sides. His voice, when he spoke, was quiet, raw. "I know I haven't earned your forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it." He paused, swallowing hard. "I walked away 8 years ago. I chose my company over you, over them. I can't undo that. I can't give back the time I stole." Grace's eyes were wet. She did not speak. She just watched him, waiting. "But I want to try," Ethan continued. His voice cracked. "I want to be here. Not just with money. With everything. I want to know Lucas. I want Emma to not be afraid of me. I want." He stopped, his throat too tight to continue. Grace wiped her eyes. Her face was a storm of emotions. Anger, grief, hope. She looked at Emma sleeping peacefully in the bed, then at Lucas standing guard. Finally, she looked back at Ethan. "I'm not ready to forgive you," she said quietly. "I don't know if I ever will be." The words hurt, but Ethan nodded. "I understand." "But," Grace continued, her voice soft but firm, "if you're serious, if you really want to be part of their lives, then prove it. Not with money. With time. With presence. With showing up when it's hard." Ethan's eyes burned. A tear slipped down his cheek. "I will. I promise." Grace held his gaze for a long moment. Then she turned back to Emma, her hand finding her daughter's once more. The conversation was over. But the door, for the first time, was not completely closed. Ethan stood there, trembling, exhausted, and more determined than he had ever been in his life. He had lost everything to build his empire. Now he would risk everything to build his family. It was time to start again. 1 year later, the Santa Monica apartment was nothing like Ethan's old penthouse. 2 bedrooms instead of 4. A living room that opened to a narrow balcony overlooking the beach. The furniture was modest, bought from a regular store. The walls were painted warm cream. Pictures hung in simple frames. Emma's drawings. Lucas's academic awards. A photo of all 4 of them together, taken 3 months ago at the pier. It was a home, not a showcase. Evening light poured through the windows, golden and soft. The sun was setting over the Pacific, painting the sky orange and pink and purple. The sound of waves reached them from below, a constant rhythm. Seagulls cried in the distance. Ethan stood in the kitchen, stirring pasta sauce. The smell of garlic and tomatoes filled the room. He wore jeans and a plain shirt, sleeves rolled up. No suit. No tie. He had left Novalink 6 months ago, after Rachel pulled her funding. The company still existed, but it was no longer his. Someone else sat in that glass office now. Ethan did not miss it. The front door opened, and Grace walked in carrying grocery bags. Her hair was shorter now, cut to her shoulders. She wore light blue scrubs. She had just come from her shift at the hospital, where she worked as a nursing assistant while taking evening classes. Her face looked tired but content. "Sorry I'm late." Professor went over on time. "How was class?" "Exhausting, but good." She hung her jacket on the hook. "We learned cardiac care today." "I actually understood most of it." Grace smiled slightly. Not big, but genuine. Over the past year, those smiles had become more frequent. The distance between them had shrunk slowly, carefully. They were not lovers anymore. That bridge had burned long ago. But they were partners now. Co-parents. Friends, maybe. The balcony door slid open, and Emma burst inside. Her cheeks were flushed from running. Her hair flew wild. She wore a yellow sundress, her rabbit tucked under one arm. She was healthy now, her breathing clear and strong. The asthma was managed with medication Ethan made sure she never ran out of. She had not been to the emergency room in 11 months. Mom! Look what I found. Emma held up a seashell, white and smooth. Grace knelt down. It's beautiful, baby. We'll add it to your collection. Emma beamed and ran to her room, already talking to her rabbit. Her footsteps were light and quick. The sound of a child who could breathe, who could run, who could live without fear. Lucas came in last, closing the door behind him. He was taller than a year ago, filling out. He wore a college hoodie, Berkeley printed across the chest. Full scholarship. Pre-med track. He would start in the fall. He looked different than the hard boy Ethan had first met in that basement doorway. His face was softer now. His eyes less wary. He smiled more. Small victories that felt like miracles. Dinner ready? Almost. Can you set the table? Lucas nodded and pulled out plates. It was such a simple request, the kind families made every day. But for Ethan, it was everything. Because Lucas had answered. Because he was here. Because the wall between them had developed cracks, letting light through. They sat down to eat together, the four of them around a table Ethan had assembled himself from a flat pack box. The pasta was good, made with care. They passed the salad bowl. They poured water into mismatched glasses. Emma talked about seashells, her voice bright. Grace asked Lucas about college preparation. Lucas discussed the biology textbook he was reading, his eyes lighting up when he explained cellular respiration. Ethan listened. He did not dominate the conversation. He just sat there, present, grateful. This was what he had missed during those 8 years. Not the big milestones. The small ones. The dinners. The conversations. The sound of Emma laughing. After dinner, Lucas helped clear the table. Emma went to brush her teeth. Grace started washing dishes. Ethan dried them, standing beside her. They worked in comfortable silence, a rhythm developed over months. Lucas leaned against the counter, watching them. His expression was thoughtful. You know, I've been thinking about medical school. I want to be a doctor. But not for the money or status. I want to help people. People like us. People who can't afford it. Grace turned off the water, her eyes shining. Lucas glanced at Ethan. I don't want to live like you did, Dad. Chasing success and forgetting everything else. The word hit Ethan like a wave. Dad. Lucas had never called him that before. Not once in the entire year. It had always been Ethan, if anything. But now, standing in this small kitchen with dish soap on his hands, Lucas had called him Dad. Ethan's throat tightened. He set down the towel carefully, afraid his hands would shake. I think that's the best thing I've ever heard. Lucas's lips curved into a small smile. Not forced. Genuine. Good. Because I'm not making the same mistakes you did. No malice in the words. Just truth. And maybe affection. Lucas pushed off the counter and headed to his room. Grace's hand touched Ethan's arm briefly. Contact. Connection. He's coming around. Ethan nodded, not trusting himself to speak. His eyes were burning. Later, after Emma was tucked into bed and Grace had retreated to study, Ethan stepped onto the balcony. The night air was cool, carrying the salt smell of the ocean. The beach below was dark except for scattered lights. Waves rolled in steadily, white foam catching moonlight. Stars filled the sky above, more visible here than from his penthouse. They shone clear and bright, thousands of them. Ethan leaned on the railing and looked up. He thought about the man he had been a year ago. The CEO in the glass tower. The man who had everything and nothing. The man who did not know his own children. He thought about Grace's cold face in that basement doorway. Emma's frightened eyes. Lucas's words were strangers now. They were not strangers anymore. It was not perfect. Grace still kept walls up. She slept in her own room, lived her own life. They were not together. Not in that way. Maybe they never would be. The past had left scars too deep to erase completely. But they were partners now. They talked. They planned. They raised their children together. Lucas still kept his distance sometimes. Still pulled back when things got too close. But he smiled more. He talked more. He asked Ethan questions about science and medicine. And tonight, he had called him Dad. That single word was worth more than any quarterly earnings report. More than any investor presentation. More than anything Ethan had achieved in his entire career. Emma was the easiest. She trusted quickly, loved freely. She had started calling him Daddy 3 months ago, tentatively at first. He had stayed every single day. And her fear had melted into acceptance, then affection. Ethan's eyes blurred. A tear slipped down his cheek. He did not wipe it away. The balcony door slid open. Grace stepped out, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. She stood beside him, not touching but close. They looked at the ocean together. "You okay?" Ethan nodded. His voice was rough. "Lucas called me Dad." Grace smiled. A real smile, soft and warm. "I heard." They stood in silence for a while. Finally, Ethan spoke again, barely above a whisper. "Complete forgiveness is still far away, isn't it?" Grace looked at him. Her expression was complicated. Sad but hopeful. "Yeah, it is." Ethan nodded. "Forgiveness was not something you earned in a year. Maybe not in a lifetime. Some things could not be undone." But Grace continued, her voice soft. "But we're a family again. That counts for something." Ethan turned to her, eyes wet. "It counts for everything." Grace held his gaze for a moment. Then she looked back at the ocean. They stood there together, two people who had loved and lost and were learning to build something new. Inside, Emma slept peacefully. Lucas studied in his room, preparing for a future where he would help people. And Ethan stood on a balcony overlooking the Pacific, no longer a CEO in a glass tower but a father in a small apartment. He had lost his empire, but he had found his family. And in the end, that was the only victory that mattered. Ethan traded 8 years for an empire built on glass. What would you sacrifice for success? Drop a comment below if you've ever had to choose between ambition and the people you love. And if this story touched you, please share it with friends or family. You never know who might need a little hope today. Thank you for being part of our journey today. This has been Story Theater.